Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever felt drained, even when surrounded by people? You give and give and give until there's nothing left for you. But what if I told you you were never meant to carry everyone else? What if the real transformation begins the moment you stop chasing validation and start listening to the quiet truth inside you? We were raised to believe that attachment is love, that being available, accessible, and emotionally tangled with others is somehow a virtue. But it isn't. It's a trap, one that keeps you from ever truly knowing yourself. Let me show you the other path, the path of detachment, not from love, but from illusion. When you focus on others, you scatter your power. Your thoughts become entangled in how they feel, what they think, whether they approve, whether they stay. You become a mirror to their emotions instead of a master of your own. And in this restless reflection, you lose yourself. But when you begin to focus on yourself, the fog clears. You realize that most people are not thinking about you. They're too busy thinking about themselves. You stop seeking applause for being available and start building peace by being selective. Detachment does not mean indifference. It means you no longer seek your identity in the presence or absence of another. It means you can care deeply and still walk away when your inner peace is disturbed. That's power. That's freedom. You don't detach because you don't love. You detach because you finally love yourself enough to stop being consumed by someone else's storm. This world will tell you to hustle, to impress, to belong. But silence teaches you something different. You already belong to yourself. And when you return to yourself, you return to clarity, strength, and stillness. True peace begins where attachment ends. From the moment we are born, we are taught to cling to people, to ideas, to outcomes. We cling to our parents for comfort, to our friends for identity, to our lovers for validation, and to our routines for a sense of control. But somewhere along the way, what begins as connection slowly mutates into dependency. And dependency, no matter how tender it may seem on the surface, is the soil where suffering grows. You might not notice it at first. It starts subtly. A need for someone's presence, their approval, their constant attention. You tell yourself it's love, you convince yourself that it's loyalty or care or commitment, but deep down, you begin to sense a quiet anxiety, a restlessness that only appears when the person isn't near, when the texts go unanswered, or when the energy between you shifts. That anxiety is your signal. It is your soul trying to tell you this is no longer connection, this is attachment. And attachment is not the same as love. Love is expansive, calm, and free. It allows space to breathe. Attachment is tight, anxious, and consuming. It demands constant reassurance. It is built on fear. The fear of loss, the fear of loneliness, the fear of being left behind. And anything built on fear will eventually collapse. The moment you attach your peace to someone else, you hand them the remote control to your inner world. Their moods become your moods. Their silence becomes your insecurity. Their validation becomes your oxygen. And that right there is the source of so much pain. Because you cannot control other people, not how they feel, not what they choose, not how long they stay. And so, if your happiness is tethered to someone else's behavior, it will rise and fall like a storm-tossed ship. But when you begin to let go, really let go, you notice something incredible, a lightness, a stillness, a clarity. You realize that your peace never truly came from them. It was within you all along, buried beneath the noise of need and the pressure of expectations. Detachment is not rejection. It is a return to self, a return to the realization that you are whole without anything or anyone outside of you. Detachment is not easy. The ego screams when it feels abandoned. It tells you that letting go is weakness, that if you stop clinging, you will lose something precious. But the truth is, the only thing you lose when you detach is the illusion that you needed them to be okay. And what you gain in return is everything: autonomy, clarity, and true inner strength. Peace not found in the presence of others. It is found in the absence of emotional chaos. And to reach that place, you must be willing to walk away, not from love, but from the need for control. You must be willing to say, I will love you, but I will not lose myself in the process. Focus on yourself, not because others don't matter, but because you finally realize how much you do. Because you deserve to be centered in your own story. Because you deserve relationships that are born from choice, not need. Because you deserve a mind that is not constantly at war with itself, trying to predict, please, or persuade others to stay. The irony is, the more you let go, the more deeply you connect, not from desperation, but from authenticity, not from clinging, but from freedom. Real love flows when it is not forced. Real relationships grow when they are not suffocated. And real peace arises when you stop trying to control what was never yours to begin with. If you're tired, if you're overwhelmed, if you're feeling lost in the constant effort of trying to be enough for others, pause, breathe, let go. Let go of needing their attention. Let go of needing their approval. Let go of needing to be understood, explained, accepted. Not because these things don't matter, but because you matter more. True peace doesn't come when everyone stays. It comes when you no longer fear their leaving. When you understand that your spirit cannot be broken by someone else's absence. That is the beginning of real freedom. That is the root of true peace. And it always begins with the courage to detach. Focusing inward creates clarity. In a world that constantly pulls your attention outward, the idea of turning inward can feel almost unnatural. From the moment you wake up, you are bombarded with noise, notifications, opinions, comparisons, and expectations. Social media tells you who you should be. Family tells you who they want you to be. Society tells you what success is, what love should look like, and how your life is supposed to unfold. And somewhere in the chaos of trying to meet all these silent demands, you forget to check in with the one person who truly matters: yourself. You begin to drift. You start living a life that looks good on the outside but feels hollow on the inside. You do what is expected. You chase what is popular. You speak to be accepted, and you work to be applauded. But the more attention you give to the outside world, the less you hear your inner voice. And that voice, quiet as it may be, carries the truth you're searching for. Focusing inward isn't selfish, it's necessary. It's the only way to know who you really are, beneath the layers of noise and influence. It's the way you strip back all the false identities and connect with your authentic self. That's where clarity lives, not in the eyes of others, but in the silence of self-awareness. When you begin to focus inward, the fog begins to lift. You stop reacting to every comment, every glance, every shift in energy around you. You no longer live at the mercy of other people's moods or expectations. You start to notice how often you've been triggered, not because of what others did, but because you weren't grounded in your own truth. Their opinions only hurt because you weren't sure of your own. Their silence only stung because you hadn't learned how to be content with your own company. The more you turn inward, the less you chase. You stop looking for answers in other people. You stop waiting for someone to tell you what your life should look like. Instead, you begin to ask yourself, what do I truly want? What makes me feel alive? What do I need to let go of to be at peace? And here's what happens when you start asking those questions. The distractions lose their power. The people you once tried so hard to impress no longer hold weight in your world. The need to be seen, understood, or approved of begins to fade. You realize that clarity doesn't come from being loud or being liked. It comes from being still. And in that stillness, you meet the real you. The clarity that comes from inward focus gives you a quiet strength. You stop giving your energy to things that don't nourish your soul. You stop arguing to prove your worth. You stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, because you finally realize not everything deserves your energy. Not everyone deserves your presence. Not every battle is yours to fight. You begin to live with intention. You start making decisions that align with your core, not your conditioning. You become selective with your time, your thoughts, and your emotions. You learn that clarity is not about having all the answers, but about asking the right questions and being honest enough to sit with the answers, no matter how uncomfortable they are. And yes, focusing inward can be uncomfortable at first. It forces you to face the parts of yourself you've ignored or buried, the pain you haven't processed, the beliefs you inherited but never examined. But this is where the transformation begins. In that inner space, you confront your shadows, and instead of running, you understand them, you heal them, and through that healing, you begin to shine from within. The truth is, the world becomes simpler when your mind becomes quieter, and your mind becomes quieter when you stop giving it to everyone and everything outside of you. Focus inward. Listen deeply. Trust what you find there. Because clarity isn't something you seek, it's something you uncover. It's been there all along, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the constant reaching outward. It waits patiently for you to return home to yourself. And when you finally do, you'll see the world not as it is told to you, but as it truly is. Not through the lens of chaos, but through the calm certainty that comes only from within. Detachment is not coldness, it's wisdom. Many people mistake detachment for apathy. They assume that to detach is to disconnect completely, to stop caring, to become emotionally numb. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Detachment, in its purest form, is not about shutting your heart down. It's about opening it wisely. It is the art of caring deeply without losing yourself in the process. It is the decision to protect your peace, not by building walls, but by recognizing what you can and cannot control. You can love someone and still detach from the need to control them. You can support others and still know where your responsibility ends. You can listen with compassion without absorbing every emotion that doesn't belong to you. This is wisdom, the wisdom to stay grounded, even when others around you are spiraling. It's the wisdom to know that your energy is sacred, and not every situation deserves your emotional involvement. When you're attached, you live in fear. Fear of losing, fear of being abandoned, fear of being misunderstood. That fear pushes you to cling tighter, to overextend, to please excessively, all in the hope that you won't be left behind. But in doing so, you betray yourself. You abandon your own needs for the sake of someone else's comfort. And ironically, the more you try to hold on, the more things slip through your fingers. Wisdom teaches you the opposite. It shows you that what is meant for you cannot be forced, and what is not meant for you cannot be kept, no matter how tightly you cling. Detachment is the understanding that you are not here to fix people, to save them, or to make them stay. You are here to walk your own path and to share your love freely, without demand, without possession. When you detach, you reclaim your power. You no longer measure your worth based on how others treat you. Their behavior stops dictating your emotional state. You become the observer, not the reactor. This doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you feel everything more purely because your emotions are no longer tangled in someone else's chaos. Detachment allows space. Space for reflection, for clarity, for growth. It teaches you to pause before reacting, to step back before responding, to breathe before absorbing. It teaches you to ask, is this mine to carry? Is this worth my peace? Do I need to involve myself, or can I let this pass without losing my center? People often confuse emotional distance with emotional maturity. But emotional maturity is not about being distant, it's about being discerning. It's knowing when to engage and when to let go, when to speak and when to stay silent, when to care and when to walk away. And yes, sometimes detachment looks like silence. It looks like not responding. It looks like stepping away from drama, from manipulation, from expectations that drain you, not because you don't care, but because you care enough about yourself to not participate in cycles that break you. Now, this is not coldness. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. This is the quiet strength of a person who has learned that love without boundaries is not love. It is self-neglect. That peace is not found in fixing others, but in facing yourself. That true connection cannot come from neediness, but only from wholeness. The world will often guilt you for detaching. It will call you selfish for choosing yourself. It will call you distant for not reacting. But wisdom doesn't need to defend itself. Detachment doesn't explain itself. It simply moves with grace, holding compassion in one hand and self-respect in the other. So don't let anyone convince you that detachment is unkind. Let them misunderstand. Let them judge. Because while they're entangled in the chaos, you'll be standing in stillness, free, calm, and rooted in your own truth. And that kind of stillness, that's not coldness. That's a power few will ever understand. The illusion of control over others keeps you trapped. Most people spend their lives trying to manage what they cannot manage. Other people, their moods, their thoughts, their decisions, their loyalty. We believe that if we say the right thing, if we behave a certain way, if we love hard enough, we can influence how others treat us. But this is the grand illusion, the false belief that with enough effort, we can control someone else's nature. And this illusion is exactly what keeps us frustration, anxiety. You might not even realize how deep this illusion runs. It hides in small things. The way you replay conversations, hoping you said the right thing. The way you adjust your words to avoid upsetting someone. The way you wait for a text back. Heart pounding, attaching your worth to whether someone responds. The way you overthink. constantly trying to manage someone else's perception of you. This is not connection. This is bondage. To believe you can control others is to constantly live in a state of tension. You're never fully at peace because your peace depends on someone else's actions. You can't relax because you're always scanning the emotional climate around you, trying to predict, fix, or please. You begin to perform rather than live. You lose your authenticity in the process of trying to maintain the illusion that you are somehow in charge of what other people do or feel. But the truth is, no matter how much you care, how much you give, or how much you sacrifice, people will only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. Their ability to love, to show up, to understand, is not something you can manufacture by your effort. It's a reflection of them, not you. And trying to control that is like trying to hold the ocean still with your hands. The need to control is rooted in fear. Fear of being hurt, fear of being rejected, fear of not being enough. So we think, if I can keep everything in line, if I can keep everyone happy, maybe I won't be abandoned. Maybe I'll be safe. But that safety is an illusion too, because it depends on circumstances you can never fully guarantee. And in trying to create safety through control, you imprison yourself in anxiety. The way out of this trap is through surrender, not to chaos, but to reality. The reality that you are only responsible for your thoughts, your choices, your reactions. That's it. You are not responsible for how someone else interprets your words. You are not responsible for how they show up in your life. You are not responsible for whether they stay or leave. And when you release that burden, something incredible happens. You become free, free to speak your truth without tailoring it, free to be kind without needing it returned, free to walk away without guilt when your peace is disturbed, free to stop managing others and start managing yourself. Because that's the only real power you have, yourself. Letting go of control doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally understand that care is not control, that love is not possession, that peace does not come from tightening your grip, but from loosening your expectations. People will do what they want. They will stay if they choose to. They will leave if they must. And none of it defines your value. You don't need to beg, explain, chase, or manipulate. You don't need to prove your worth to someone who doesn't see it. The right people won't need to be controlled. They'll come with ease. They'll bring peace, not confusion. They'll meet you where you are because they want to, not because you had to mold yourself into someone else to earn it. So release the illusion. Stop trying to control others and instead master yourself. Learn to regulate your emotions. Learn to sit with discomfort. Learn to accept uncertainty. That's where real strength lives, not in controlling the outside, but in cultivating peace on the inside. And once you do, the world shifts, not because it changes, but because your relationship to it does. You no longer need everything to go your way because you know how to stay steady even when it doesn't. That is liberation. That is clarity. That is power. And it all begins the moment you stop chasing control and start choosing freedom. Solitude reveals your true power. We live in a world that praises constant connection. Connection to people, to technology, to entertainment, to distraction. You're told that being alone means being lonely, that solitude is something to avoid, something to fill with noise, scrolling, talking, doing, but that belief is false. In truth, solitude is not emptiness, it is space. And in that space, you begin to hear what has always been there, but drowned beneath the volume of the world. Your own voice. When you choose to be alone, not as a punishment, but as a practice, something powerful begins to happen. The masks start to fall. The roles you play for others no longer matter. You're no longer performing, no longer adjusting yourself to fit in, please, or impress. You begin to face yourself as you are, unfiltered, raw, real. And that encounter, while uncomfortable at first, is where your transformation begins. Most people fear solitude because it confronts them with their inner world. It removes the distractions that help them escape the emotions they've buried, the questions they've avoided, the truths they've refused to face. But these are the very things that hold the key to your healing and your power. When you sit alone in silence, the noise in your head gets louder before it gets quieter. The mind resists. It begs for stimulation. It wants to be anywhere but here. But if you stay, if you breathe and wait, that chaos begins to settle. And beneath it, you find something deeper than thought, a calm presence, a steady awareness that has always been there. That is you. You realize that your strength is not in how much you do, how many people surround you, or how busy your schedule is. Your strength is in your ability to sit with yourself and be at peace, to not need someone else to fill your silence, to validate your worth, to distract you from your inner landscape. When you no longer fear your own presence, you become powerful beyond measure because you are no longer dependent on anyone or anything outside of yourself to feel whole. Solitude allows you to recharge, to reset, to realign. You begin to see where you've been giving too much of yourself away. You notice the relationships that drain you, the obligations that suffocate you, the patterns that keep you stuck. And from that clarity, you make better choices, not reactive ones, not desperate ones, but grounded, conscious decisions that align with your truth. In solitude, your intuition sharpens. You start to trust yourself more. You stop asking everyone else for advice because you realize that the answers aren't out there, they're within. You begin to respect your own rhythm. You start doing things not because you're expected to, but because they feel right for you. And in that shift, you reclaim your power. There is a quiet dignity in being alone and content. Not because you've shut the world out, but because you've finally made peace with who you are when no one is watching. That peace cannot be taken away from you. It cannot be shaken by rejection, by misunderstanding, by the temporary absence of others. It is rooted in something deeper than circumstance. It is rooted in self, acknowledge an inner strength. Some of your greatest growth will happen in solitude. It is where you learn to be your own source of comfort, of motivation, of stability. It's where you build a relationship with yourself so strong that no external situation can shake your foundation. You become your own sanctuary, your own home. So don't run from solitude. Seek it, embrace it. Let it strip away the false and show you the real. Let it teach you that you are already enough. Let it remind you that your power doesn't come from the crowd, it comes from your center. And once you've found that center, you'll carry it with you into every room you walk into. You won't need to prove yourself, to be seen, or to be chosen, because you've already chosen yourself. And that is a power no one can take away. True connection begins with self-esteem. Many people chase connection through others, believing that if they find the right person, the right friend, the right partner, they will finally feel whole. But the truth is, no one can connect deeply with you until you've connected deeply with yourself. Without self-understanding, every relationship becomes a mirror of confusion. You begin to project your wounds, your fears, your insecurities, expecting others to fix them, heal them, or at the very least, not trigger them. And in doing so, you build relationships not on truth but on unconscious need. When you don't understand yourself, you seek from others what you haven't found within. You look for validation because you haven't yet given yourself acceptance. You demand loyalty because you fear abandonment. You crave reassurance because you haven't learned how to be emotionally steady on your own. These unmet parts of you become invisible expectations you silently place on others. And when they fail to meet them, you feel let down, not realizing that the foundation was shaky to begin with. But when you begin the journey inward, when you sit with yourself, question yourself, and truly see yourself, something begins to shift. You start to understand why you think the way you do, why you feel what you feel, why you react the way you react. You begin to connect the dots of your past, your patterns, your pain. And in that awareness, a new clarity is born. You stop blaming the world. You stop expecting others to complete what only you can build. You begin to take responsibility, not for what happened to you, but for how you carry it. Self-understanding brings compassion. It softens your inner world. You stop judging yourself for your flaws, and in doing so, you become less judgmental of others. You realize that everyone is navigating something unseen, that no one is perfect, and that love cannot bloom in the soil of expectation. You no longer need others to perform a role. You simply allow them to be. And that, in itself, creates space for authentic connection. When you understand yourself, your boundaries become clear, not because you want to control others, but because you've learnt to protect your peace. You no longer tolerate relationships that require you to shrink, hide, or betray yourself. You stop settling for connections built on convenience or fear of being alone. You value your presence too much to place it where it's not appreciated. And from that self-respect, a different kind of connection emerges, one rooted in depth, honesty, and alignment. You also begin to communicate differently. You express rather than suppress. You listen rather than react. You speak from a place of self-awareness, not emotional chaos. You no longer try to be understood by everyone because you understand yourself, and that's enough. This kind of inner clarity removes the need for external approval. It frees you from constantly editing who you are to fit someone else's version of acceptance. And here's the paradox. The more you understand yourself, the more connected you feel to others, not because you depend on them, but because you can finally meet them from a place of wholeness. You can give love without needing it to fill a void. You can receive love without questioning your worth. You can walk away when necessary, not out of bitterness, but from a place of peace. True connection doesn't come from merging with someone else. It comes from standing fully in yourself and allowing another to do the same. It's two people meeting with open hands, not grabbing or clinging, but offering and receiving freely. That kind of connection is rare because it requires deep self-work. It requires that you've faced yourself honestly, accepted yourself fully, and chosen to live with integrity. If you want to connect deeply with others, start by connecting deeply with yourself. Know your fears, your dreams, your wounds, your truth. Embrace all that you are, not just the parts that are easy to love, but the parts that are messy, confused, even broken. Because only when you accept your full self can you meet others without armor, without pretense. In the end, self-understanding is not just a path to inner peace. It is the foundation of every meaningful relationship you'll ever have. And once you build that foundation, everything else becomes clearer, softer, truer. You no longer chase connection, you become it. When you begin to focus on yourself and detach from others, you step into the rarest form of power, inner freedom. You are no longer swayed by noise, no longer imprisoned by expectation, and no longer dependent on the approval or presence of others to feel whole. You no longer chase, beg, or perform. Instead, you observe, you choose, and you protect your peace. Attachment is not isolation, it's clarity. It's knowing who you are and not losing that in the presence of anyone else. It's releasing control, letting go of illusions, and understanding that your responsibility is not to change others, but to master yourself. In solitude, you find strength. In stillness, you find wisdom. And in self-understanding, you find real connection, the kind that isn't built on fear, but on truth. This path is not for everyone. It demands honesty, discipline, and courage. But those who walk it discover something priceless, a life led not by chaos, but by conscious choice. A life where peace isn't found in others, but within. But focusing on yourself doesn't mean isolation. It means alignment with your values, your truth, your energy. It's knowing that when you protect your peace, you heal, and when you heal, you evolve.
Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a point in life where noise no longer inspires you, it irritates you, where explanations feel like begging and arguments feel like traps. Not because you've lost your voice, but because you've finally found your peace. You start realizing that silence is not empty, it's full of answers, of healing, of truth. You stop chasing people who never look back. You stop explaining your worth to those committed to misunderstanding you, and something sacred begins to unfold. You begin to focus on you, not the version they shaped, but the one you buried to keep the peace. If you've ever felt tired of the noise, if you've ever wondered what might happen if you stopped explaining, chasing, proving, then stay with me. Because once you master the art of focusing on yourself in silence, you become untouchable. Not loud, not boastful, just untouchable. Silence is a form of strength, not weakness. In a world that constantly demands your reaction, your opinion, your validation, your energy, choosing silence is an act of rebellion. It's not the absence of thought or emotion. It's the decision to rise above the noise. Because not every argument is worth your breath. Not every insult deserves a response. And not every invitation to chaos requires your attendance. When you stop reacting to everything and everyone, you begin to realize how much power you are unknowingly giving away. Each time you argue to defend your worth, you're silently handing someone else the authority to judge it. Every time you explain yourself to someone who has already decided not to understand you, you're draining your soul in an empty transaction. But silence, that's different. Silence keeps your power in your own hands. It preserves your mystery, your energy, and most importantly, your peace. People often mistake silence for submission. They think if you're not speaking, you must have nothing to say. But that's not true. Silence speaks volumes. Just in a language most are too loud to hear. It says, I'm aware, I'm in control, and I don't need to prove anything to you. It is the voice of someone who no longer needs to win every battle, because they've already won themselves. There is strength in restraint. When you hold your tongue in the heat of chaos, when you choose calm over conflict, when you remove yourself instead of reacting, you're not running away, you're mastering yourself. You're choosing peace over drama, clarity over confusion, Growth over ego, this is not about being passive. This is about being powerful. Because real power doesn't scream. It doesn't seek validation. It doesn't need to be seen, heard, or acknowledged to exist. It simply is. And that is what silence teaches you. It roots you in your own essence. It brings you closer to your truth. Because in silence, there are no distractions. And when you focus on yourself in silence, the world begins to shift. The people who used to provoke you no longer affect you. The things that once triggered you lose their grip. You begin to walk lighter. Not because life got easier, but because your soul got stronger. The next time you're tempted to respond, to explain, to defend, pause. Ask yourself, is this reaction empowering me or draining me? Will this bring me peace, or will it simply make me louder in a room that still refuses to listen? Silence may feel uncomfortable at first. It may feel like surrender, but in time it becomes your sanctuary. It becomes the place where you rediscover your voice. Not the voice others expect, but the one that's been waiting underneath all along. And once you find that voice in your silence, you'll never waste it on the noise again. Energy wasted on external battles steals from your internal growth. Every time you argue with someone who refuses to understand you, you give away a piece of your peace. Every time you try to convince others of your worth, you hand over the power to define you. And every time you involve yourself in situations that don't align with your purpose, you delay your own evolution. This is the hidden cost of external battles. They rob you of the energy needed to become who you are meant to be. We've been conditioned to think that engagement equals strength, that to walk away is to surrender, but that's an illusion. Real strength lies in knowing what deserves your attention and what deserves your silence. Your mind, your heart, your spirit, they are like soil. What you plant there grows. If you're constantly planting conflict, defensiveness, and distraction, how can you expect peace, clarity, or vision to take root? When your focus is always outward, on proving something to someone, on correcting false narratives, on chasing validation, you starve your inner world. You begin to live reactively rather than intentionally. Instead of nurturing your dreams, you're busy managing someone else's opinion. Instead of growing in wisdom, you're tangled in ego battles. This is how people lose themselves. Not in one dramatic moment, but in 1,000 small concessions of energy that never served them in the first place. The truth is, your growth needs solitude. It needs silence. It needs space. Just like a seed needs soil and time to sprout unseen, your inner life thrives in stillness. But when you are always pulled outward, when every trigger has access to your attention, when every critic gets a response, that stillness is never allowed to form. And without stillness, there is no awareness. Without awareness, there is no transformation. There is a quiet discipline in turning your attention inward, in choosing not to react to every provocation, in letting people believe what they want while you keep building in silence. This isn't about being aloof. It's about being intentional. Not everything deserves a response. Not every battle is yours to fight. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Not because you're weak, but because you've decided your energy is sacred. Energy is your most precious currency. Where you invest it determines your future. So ask yourself, are you investing in growth or spending it on distractions? Are you building your inner world or constantly reacting to the outer one? You will never outgrow chaos if you keep feeding it your attention. But the moment you decide to pull your energy back, to focus on your healing, your peace, your path, that's when the shift begins. That's when growth accelerates. Not loudly, not publicly, but deeply, quietly and powerfully. People fear what they can't read. There's something deeply unsettling about a person who doesn't reveal everything. When you no longer overshare, over-explain, or react on cue, others begin to question what's really going on inside you. And that mystery, it makes people uncomfortable. Because when they can't predict you, they can't control you. When they can't categorize you, they can't dismiss you. And when they can't read you, they realize they can't manipulate you. We live in a time where everyone broadcasts everything. Feelings, thoughts, frustrations, successes. It's all out there, exposed and accessible. But when you choose silence, when you move without announcing every step, you disrupt that pattern. People don't know what you're thinking, what you're planning, or how you feel about them. That uncertainty puts the power back in your hand. It's not about playing games. It's about preserving your depth. When you constantly express every emotion, every detail, you make yourself easy to map out. And once people feel they understand the full terrain of who you are, they stop being curious. They stop respecting the vastness within you. But when you hold back, not in fear, but in wisdom, when you let people feel your presence without needing to explain it, you become unforgettable. Silence creates space, space for others to reflect, space for truth to rise, space for you to observe, not just speak. It shifts the energy in the room. It makes people listen more carefully, watch more closely, wonder more deeply. And in that space, your power grows, because it's not what you say that defines your strength. It's what you choose not to say. There's a kind of freedom in becoming unreadable, not because you're hiding, but because you've mastered discretion. You've learned that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Some people are only listening to twist your words. Some only want to know you so they can use what they know against you. But when you go quiet, when you stop giving them the map, they're left wandering. And while they're lost in questions, you are centered in peace. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to make loud declarations. You just live. You grow. You evolve in silence, and the silence becomes your shield. It becomes your boundary. It becomes the message without a single word spoken. When people can no longer predict your next move, they are forced to respect your presence, because unpredictability is intimidating. Mystery is powerful, and a person who doesn't explain, doesn't beg, and doesn't announce their every intention, holds a gravity that no performance can replicate. Don't fear being unreadable. Embrace it. Let people wonder. Let them talk. Let them guess. Because while they're trying to figure you out, you're already 10 steps ahead, growing, healing, building, in silence. Not everything demands your attention. There is a quiet wisdom in knowing when to engage and when to simply observe. So much of our energy is wasted reacting to things that don't matter, things that distract us, provoke us, or tempt us into battles that have no reward. But once you begin to understand the value of your attention, you realize it's not something to give freely. It's something to protect, to guard, and to direct with purpose. The world is constantly shouting at you. Opinions, judgments, arguments, and noise, all competing for your focus. And if you're not intentional, you'll find yourself pulled into every conversation, every drama, every distraction. You'll become drained, scattered, and disconnected from your center. Because the truth is, not everything that reaches your ears deserves to enter your mind. Not every invitation requires a response. There is nothing weak about choosing silence over reaction. In fact, that is where true discipline lives. When you no longer feel the need to correct every lie, respond to every insult, or insert yourself into every discussion, you reclaim your time and your peace. You begin to live from a place of clarity, not chaos. Attention is energy, and where your attention goes, your life follows. If you constantly give your focus to what is meaningless, you starve what is meaningful. You delay your growth by feeding your ego. You slow your progress by getting lost in other people's stories. But when you start choosing carefully, deciding where your attention lands, you begin to shape a life that actually reflects your values and your vision. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is look away, not in ignorance, but in intention. Not because you're unaware, but because you're no longer interested in being pulled into things that don't build you. Let others speak. Let them argue. Let them seek validation in noise. You're not obligated to attend every conflict you're invited to. You don't have to participate in every opinion that passes your way. Your peace is sacred. Your focus is limited. Use it wisely. Pour it into your passions. Pour it into your healing, your creativity, your evolution. The more you turn inward, the more you begin to notice how much of what once demanded your attention no longer deserves it. It's not about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about becoming clear. Clear on what matters. Clear on what helps you grow. Clear on what aligns with your spirit. And once you master this clarity, you stop chasing noise. You stop needing to prove, to defend, to react. You move with purpose. You speak with intention. And you learn that silence is not the absence of sound, it's the presence of power. Because not everything needs your attention. And when you finally realize that, you'll discover how much lighter your soul becomes. Silence is not the absence of action. It is the sharpening of intention. In the quiet moments, when no one is watching and no applause can be heard, the most meaningful transformation takes place. Silence is not a pause in your progress. It is the furnace in which your next chapter is being forged. When you detach from the noise, from the need to constantly prove, display, and explain, you begin to align with your deeper self, the part of you that doesn't move for approval, but for truth. We often think success must be loud, that growth must be announced, that progress is only real if others can witness it. But that belief only binds us to performance. It keeps us seeking validation instead of wisdom. But in silence, there is no audience. There is no applause. There is only the work, the quiet, intentional work that no one sees, but everyone eventually feels. This is the sacred process of inner evolution. While the world looks for signs, you're building substance. While others measure success in visibility, you're measuring yours in alignment. In silence, your spirit finds room to breathe. Your thoughts slow down. Your heart has space to speak. And in that stillness, you begin to hear what truly matters. It's in those silent seasons that your roots grow deep. It's where resilience is formed, not in the noise of reaction, but in the discipline of stillness. Because silence doesn't mean stagnation, it means focus. It means you're choosing to act, not from impulse, but from clarity. You're no longer being pulled by the chaos of the world, but guided by the direction of your own soul. And when you emerge from that silence, you do so with precision. You've outgrown the need to convince others, to be understood, or to compete for attention. You're not trying to be louder. You're trying to be truer. That is what makes you powerful, not the volume of your voice, but the depth of your presence. Not how much you speak, but how deeply your actions align with your essence. Let the silence do its work. Let it refine your mind, your intentions, your decisions. Let it strip away what no longer serves you. Because once you've been alone with your own thoughts long enough, once you've sat in that stillness and faced the raw parts of who you are, you no longer fear the opinions of others. You no longer move from insecurity, you move from inner knowing. The greatest shifts don't always begin with noise. Sometimes they begin in silence. A choice made in the dark. A decision whispered to the soul. A commitment no one hears, but everyone will feel in time. So, embrace the silence. Let it shape you. Because when you come out of it, you won't need to announce your transformation. It will speak for itself. When you focus on yourself and stay silent, people reveal who they really are. There is something about your silence that becomes a mirror for others. When you stop explaining, stop defending, and simply observe, people can no longer hide behind your responses. They begin to expose their true nature through their words, their behavior, and their reactions to your calm. Because when you're no longer feeding their expectations, they either rise to meet your energy or fall away into their own noise. It's in your silence that truth surfaces. You no longer interrupt it with justification or try to soften it with politeness. You just watch. And in that stillness, people show you exactly what they're about. Who respects your boundaries? Who gets uncomfortable when you don't play the game? Who begins to project, to panic, or to twist your silence into guilt? These are revelations you could never find in noise. When you focus inward, you remove the distractions. You're no longer caught up in managing other people's perceptions or feelings. You become more attuned to energy than to words. You start to sense who is genuine and who is performing, who is supportive and who is silently competing, who celebrates you in silence and who only cheers when others are watching. Most people aren't used to silence. They rely on your reactions to measure their influence. But when there's no reaction, only calm, grounded presence, they feel a loss of control. That's when their real self begins to emerge. Some will respect your space, others will resent it. Some will step back and reflect. Others will push harder to pull you back into the chaos. And that tells you everything you need to know, without you ever needing to ask. There is deep wisdom in detachment. Not the kind that comes from bitterness or walls, but the kind that comes from knowing your value and no longer negotiating your peace. In that space, relationships clarify. The ones built on mutual growth become stronger. The ones built on neediness, control, or manipulation begin to dissolve. Not because you force them to end, but because you stop holding them up. Silence isn't passive. It's powerful. It draws out truth the way still water reveals what's beneath the surface. When you stop speaking, you begin to see. When you stop filling the space, others have to fill it with who they really are. And often, that's all the clarity you need. Trust the quiet. Trust the distance you create. Trust that when you focus on yourself, everything around you will realign Some things falling away, others stepping closer, and all of it revealing exactly what belongs in your life and what never did. In silence, truth doesn't need to be forced. It unfolds. He becomes preoccupied with yourself. And what happens when you stay silent? You stop pouring energy into distractions. You stop handing your power to those who don't deserve it. You begin to grow, not for attention, not for validation, but for you. In silence you learn, you observe, you heal, you see the truth of others more clearly and the truth of yourself more deeply. You no longer chase noise, you embody stillness, and from that stillness a new version of you is born, stronger, wiser, and untouchable. Let people wonder. Let them talk. Let them misjudge you. Your silence is not your weakness. It is your sanctuary. It is where your next chapter is written. And when it's time, you won't have to announce your transformation. It will echo in the way you carry yourself, in the boundaries you set, and in the peace that follows you everywhere you go. Stay silent. Stay focused. Let the noise pass. And let your evolution speak louder than words ever could.